Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I have Theresa with me, and we're going to be talking all about lessons learned from her new book, Future of Insurance, focused on the Asian market. And for anybody thinking it, we didn't plan to match, but it's your treat for today. So before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody a real quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Germany. For everyone, wondering where this accent is from, I actually have no idea. But I grew up in Germany. I spent 10 years with Generali, Italian insurer, first in Germany, but also in Asia and Hong Kong. Then transitioned to management consulting, research projects. I did an academic research study on the adoption of big data in the Southeast Asian insurance industry. Have spent a decade in Asia Pacific. I lived in Hong Kong, I lived in Bangkok, I lived in Jakarta, spent a lot of time in Singapore, then moved to Australia, and now I'm in New York for a little while. And really, really excited to be here on the show and talk a little bit about what I've discovered working in the insurance industry in Asia.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I want to get started with a little bit of a level setting question. So when we were doing the prep for this, we started by talking a little bit about the perception of the insurance industry within the US and really most of the Western world, into Europe as well, and a little bit of how that's different than what you see within the Asian market. So can you just talk through that perception and kind of some of the differences that you've observed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, coming from Germany, and I mentioned earlier, I worked for Generali, coming from a very traditional industry background. And Germany, just like the US, very mature market, very saturated market, probably even more so than the US. And then when I first moved to Asia with Generali and working at the Generali Asia headquarters in Hong Kong, during that time, it was that a lot of new insurance carriers were started by Generali across Asia, so in the Philippines and Indonesia. And that's when I first realized that, insurance in developing or emerging markets looks very different than, what we find in the US or in Germany, largely driven by a low insurance penetration and low financial literacy. So there are just a lot of people in developing Asia that have never heard about insurance, that, are maybe unbanked, don't even have a bank account, right? And this is a great opportunity to shape the narrative around insurance a little bit, because if we think about it, insurance is really what enables all of us to take risks. It's there's no great economy out there that got to this point without being well insured, because there are going to be bumps in the road, and if you are protected, that is what helps you to get over this. But now, today, in Germany and also in the US and other developed countries, the perception of insurance is quite negative in a lot of time. And I move a lot, right? So I lived on 4 continents in the past 3 years, and I meet a lot of new people who are not working in the industry. And when I tell them that I work in insurance, a lot of times I get a kind of a negative perception, like people, excuse me, people sharing with me how they had bad experience in claims or, whatever. It's often seen as this really necessary evil. Whereas in countries where insurance has not been around for hundreds of years, there's a huge opportunity to reshape that perception of insurance and really show how amazing this industry really is, because, it allows people to take risks. I don't know, Emma, if you can confirm, these findings with what you have seen in the US market. But I often think it's, it's a huge perception issue, and that's not only a problem for consumers, but also for talent acquisition in the insurance industry.
Well, and behind the scenes for everybody, when we started this conversation, I didn't fully know what we were going to unpack in terms of the lessons learned within Asia. And when we started talking about this topic, I got very nerdily excited, because this idea of the perception of our industry and the impact that miscommunication and maybe lack of education has is something I see almost daily if I'm posting on TikTok, and I've had the opportunity to connect with other people, again, like in those channels where people aren't tied to their employer or anything along those lines, where they speak freely. And other TikTok creators or people on Instagram and the like, there's a lot of frustration and misunderstanding of what the purpose of our industry is and the role that they play within like kind of the greater economy. And so I got like very excited to talk with you a bit more about how they're taking a different approach and what that looks like, and how we might be able to learn from those lessons and really use some of the tools and the thought processes that they have for educating people to our benefit as well. So I do want to actually then segue into one of the specific examples that you shared with me. So can you, with everybody listening, share an example of an insurer that's doing some really cool things to help with that like educational journey and really teaching people about the value of insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an example from my book, The Future of Insurance, Asia Rising. And one of the companies I have in this book is Koala from Indonesia. So for those who are not familiar with Indonesia, it's, one of the largest markets in Asia. It's the largest market in Southeast Asia. It has a very young and tech-savvy population. So over 50% of the population is under the age of 30. So that means, they grew up as digital natives. At the same time, Indonesia has one of the lowest insurance penetration rates worldwide, only 1.6% of GDP, whereas the US has 12.4% and China even has 20%. So very low insurance penetration, which again translates to low financial literacy. A lot of people don't know about insurance, right? It's not that, children learn from their parents about insurance. Another thing that makes it quite unique is that in Indonesia, you don't have mandatory motor insurance. So you can get a car or a motorcycle and you can just drive it without getting insurance, right? So that means that a lot of people have not heard of the concept of insurance, right? But are very tech savvy, are very, young population, growing middle class, so a lot of opportunities. But insurers with their like traditional agency distribution approach have still largely failed to capture this market. And one of the reasons is that it is extremely difficult for agents to sell insurance to people who have never heard about the concept of insurance. And that means there's a lot of education that needs to be done. So Koala, while they are focusing on building an agent enablement business in Indonesia, they also recognize the need of educating consumers about the whole concept of insurance. So they have developed some like lifestyle products, micro bite-sized insurance policies that they are distributing in partnership with digital platforms and ecosystems. So for example, in Indonesia, you have a ride-hailing service called Grab, or another one called Gojek. So just like Uber or Lyft in the US. So what they have done is they have partnered with these companies, but not like a traditional, passenger injury accident coverage, but something that is top of mind for consumers. And everybody who has ever been in Jakarta know how bad traffic can get there, right? So there's a real issue about getting stuck in traffic. And so what Koala has developed is a protection plan that if you get stuck in traffic and you miss your flight, they will buy you a new flight. Right. And again, like the technology behind it, it's also like embedded. You can enter your flight details and you get automatically a payout if you get stuck in traffic. So that's amazing. And the thing is that Koala really wants people to also claim and to experience that, right? So to have a positive experience and therefore understanding why insurance can be important to protect the things you love and to, protect you from financial losses. And this is really the first step for Koala to create this like positive association with insurance in, not a traditional way, but in a tackling some of these like top of mind concerns that consumers have, showing them how insurance can help there. And then in the next step, have their agents coming in and, talk about more comprehensive products. And I think that's a really, really smart way to do it, to shape that perception of insurance to give them a positive experience and put them in the right mindset to understand really what the benefits of those insurance products are.
I think it's such, like, we were talking about this in the States. We're used to seeing like some early attempts at embedded insurance being things like, oh, I'm going to go buy this like replacement screw at Target and it's going to ask if I want to insure it for the next 3 years. And like, those are not meaningful ways for us to embed insurance into our daily life. The easiest is always like travel insurance when you're on the plane and in case something happens. But to your point, this is such a great way of tapping into a need that so many people have to make the coverage so meaningful, and with the expectation that they're going to pay claims and that they know that those are going to come in and that they're excited to use that tool to help grow the perception of the industry, which I think is a really cool example. And I was, again, geeking out as you were sharing that with more detail.
It's just like, just because you have a captive audience doesn't mean you can push any insurance product that, comes to mind. It needs to make sense and it needs to address, a concern that the customer has at that time.
Exactly. So as we round out our time together, I'd love to hear if you have any other overarching lessons or thought processes that you think we should really be considering adopting here in the States from what you've seen within the Asian market.
Well, you mentioned embedded insurance, and like the koala example was an example like that. And I feel like Asia is really at the forefront when it comes to alternative forms of distribution. I don't really like that term embedded insurance, right? Because I feel a lot of people still talk about that, travel insurance products and, but I think it's really about finding alternative distribution channels for specific products that make sense, right? So in the case of Koala, with the ride-hailing platform where they have this lifestyle insurance product embedded, right? But there are also a lot of other companies, mobile payment platforms. I have another example from India in my book, how this mobile wallet has also successfully integrated an insurance offering into their app. And again, they were able to attract over 50% of their clients who are first-time insurance buyers. And that is just incredible, right? Like a person who has never bought insurance. And we still hear these arguments that insurance can only be, sold through agencies, through relationships, etc. But this is really a pull product in a way that this company has developed. And just because they were able to identify what it is that customers are looking for and design a user journey that makes sense for them at that time and that is easy to understand, even for people with low financial literacy, right? Another example from Japan, which is more like the US market than, when we look at developing Asia. And again, they're a company who started a mobile first financial advisory company where they use technology, where they allow people, to text, to have video calls with their advisors, but still have this human component and the empathy that, is really difficult to be covered by technology, but still using, Gen AI and other advanced data analytics tools in order to make this meaningful and to really cater the right product to the right person at the right time. And I think that is something that anywhere in the world where, insurance operates, that is something worth looking into to be better at serving customers where, it makes sense for them.
Thank you so much for joining me for the conversation. And for anybody that wants to check out the book, I will have a link to it in the description of the video so that you can check it out. Most of my followers are in the US. We were just talking through logistics of it. So I will post the US Amazon link. But if you need access to the book from a different country, reach out to either one of us and we'll help get you connected so you can get your hands on the book as well. But thank you so much for joining me again and for everybody for watching, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.